You're 14 years old, and today you're standing in the agora of Athens with thousands of other young people. Everyone is silent, waiting in fear. There's a vessel filled with names. Every 9 years, Athens must send 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete, to King Minos, to the Minotaur. No one ever comes back, ever. The priest reaches into the vessel. He reads the first name. A girl screams. Her family tries to hold her, but guards approach. The second name. A boy falls to his knees begging, but no one cares. Third, fourth, fifth. With each name, a family is destroyed. Then your voice comes. Your own name. Crystal clear, real. Your legs tremble. Your mother wails. Your father tries to hold you, but the guards are stronger. They take you with the others. 13 young people. All of you between 14 and 16. All of you beautiful. All of you healthy, because you were chosen for the Minotaur. In 1 week, the black-sailed ship will depart to Crete, to the labyrinth. And you know, every mythological story has a true origin. The Minotaur might not be a real monster, but there's something in Crete, something that swallows Athens' most beautiful children and never gives them back. Tonight I'll tell you the true origin of Greek mythology's most famous story, not Theseus's heroic tale, the story of the children on that ship. For them, the labyrinth wasn't fantasy. It was real, and no one ever came out. Before diving into this forgotten truth behind one of history's most famous myths, if you enjoy learning about the hidden realities of ancient history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient mysteries together from different parts of the world, connected across millennia by our shared need to understand the darkness that shaped our civilizations. The story begins not with heroes and monsters, but with power, conquest, and the brutal realities of Bronze Age Mediterranean politics. Around 1450 BCE, the Minoan civilization on Crete was the dominant naval power in the Aegean Sea. Their palace at Knossos was the largest and most sophisticated structure in the region, a massive complex covering over 6 acres, with thousands of rooms, advanced plumbing, and elaborate frescoes showing a society of remarkable wealth and refinement. The Minoans controlled trade routes throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Their ships carried precious goods, olive oil, wine, textiles, and luxury items between Egypt, Anatolia, and the Greek mainland. This economic dominance gave them enormous political power over smaller cities and kingdoms throughout the region. Athens, in the mid-2nd millennium BCE, was not yet the great city-state it would become centuries later. It was a relatively minor settlement on the Attic Peninsula, dependent on trade and vulnerable to pressure from more powerful neighbors. And Crete, with its overwhelming naval superiority, could essentially dictate terms to mainland Greek cities. According to later Greek tradition recorded by historians like Apollodorus and Diodorus Siculus, Athens had killed a son of King Minos, a prince named Androgeos. The circumstances vary in different accounts. Some say he was murdered out of jealousy after winning too many athletic competitions in Athens. Others claim he was killed in a political dispute. Regardless of the details, King Minos demanded compensation for this killing, and he had the naval power to enforce his demands. The compensation was horrifying. Every 9 years, Athens must send 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete. The official explanation was that these youths would be sacrificed to the Minotaur, a monster that was half man, half bull, imprisoned in an elaborate labyrinth beneath the palace at Knossos. But what was the reality behind this myth? Let's start with what we know from archaeology. In 1900, British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans began excavating at Knossos. What he discovered revolutionized our understanding of Bronze Age civilization. The palace complex was vast and incredibly complex, with so many interconnected rooms, corridors, and staircases that Evans himself described it as labyrinthine. The very word labyrinth likely derives from labris, the double-headed axe that was a sacred symbol in Minoan religion and appeared repeatedly in the palace decoration. But Evans discovered something else that connected directly to the Minotaur myth. In underground chambers beneath the palace, he found evidence of bull worship. Frescoes showing young people leaping over charging bulls. Religious symbols featuring bull horns. And most disturbingly, rooms containing human bones showing signs of ritual sacrifice. Later excavations in the 1970s and 1980s uncovered more evidence. At a building near Knossos, archaeologists found the remains of several children showing knife marks on bones consistent with butchering. Carbon dating placed these remains in the late Minoan period, exactly when the tribute system would have been operating. DNA analysis of some remains suggested they weren't local Cretans but came from the Greek mainland, possibly from Athens. The bull-leaping frescoes provide another crucial piece of evidence. These beautiful paintings show young people, both male and female, performing acrobatic leaps over charging bulls. It looks graceful and athletic in the artwork, but the reality would have been deadly. Bulls are dangerous animals. Charging bulls are nearly impossible impossible to leap over successfully without extensive training, and even then, accidents would have been common. This wasn't entertainment in the modern sense. It was ritual, possibly sacrifice, disguised as religious performance. So here's what probably happened. Athens, as tribute to Crete's dominant power, was required to send young people regularly. These weren't random victims but carefully selected individuals, young, healthy, attractive, because they were intended for specific purposes in Cretan religious rituals. Some would have been trained as bull leapers, performing in religious ceremonies until they were inevitably killed by the bulls they were forced to confront. Others might have been sacrificed directly in religious ceremonies in the chambers beneath the palace. Now let's return to you, that 14-year-old Athenian whose name was just called in the lottery. What happens next? You're taken with the other 13 chosen youths to a holding area, probably a building near the port of Piraeus. You're kept there for days, maybe a week, while preparations are made for the journey. During this time, you're cleaned, dressed in specific clothing, perhaps educated about what will be expected of you. The experience is surreal. You're being prepared like a sacrifice animal, groomed and readied for your purpose. Your family is allowed to visit, but what can they say? This is a legal requirement enforced by Athens' treaty with Crete. There's no escape, no alternative. Your father might try to appear strong, telling you to face your fate with courage. Your mother can't stop crying. Your younger siblings don't fully understand what's happening, only that you're leaving and won't be coming back. The other chosen youths become your new family. You're all going through this together, bound by shared terror. You learn their names, their stories. There's Alexios, a blacksmith's son who was hoping to marry next year. Milena, daughter of a merchant who writes poetry. Damon, who wanted to be a soldier. 13 individuals, each with dreams and futures that are now being stolen. The day of departure arrives. You're marched to the harbor, where a ship waits. According to the myth, this ship has black sails as a sign of mourning, and this detail is probably accurate. The entire city would have gathered to witness the departure, not to celebrate but to mourn. Parents wailing, citizens silent with shared grief and rage at the power that could force them to sacrifice their children. You board the ship. The Cretan sailors who crew it are professional, efficient, and completely indifferent to your fate. Your cargo to them, valuable cargo that must be delivered intact, but nothing more than that. The ship leaves the harbor, and Athens recedes into the distance. You watch until you can no longer see the shore, until everything familiar disappears over the horizon, and you're left with only the sea and the approaching island of Crete. The voyage takes several days, depending on weather and wind. You and the other youths are kept in a section of the ship, not exactly imprisoned but clearly not free. The sailors feed you adequately. They need you to arrive healthy. But there's no kindness in their care, only the attention a farmer gives to livestock being brought to market. During these days, you bond with the others. At night, lying in the dark hold of the ship, you whisper to each other. Some pray to the gods. Others make wild plans for escape, though everyone knows these are fantasies. Where would you run on Crete, a foreign island under complete control of the same power that demanded your sacrifice? A few simply cry quietly. You find yourself comforting Milena, the merchant's daughter, who's younger than you and terrified. You tell her it will be all right, though you don't believe it yourself. The ship arrives at Crete. The harbor is unlike anything you've seen in Athens. Larger, more sophisticated, filled with ships from across the Mediterranean. The architecture is foreign, the people dress differently, speak a language you don't understand. Guards are waiting at the dock, not aggressively but with the calm assurance of people who do this regularly, who have received such shipments before. You're marched from the harbor toward the palace at Knossos. The journey takes several hours, giving you time to see Crete's landscape. It's beautiful, rolling hills covered in olive groves and vineyards, prosperous farms, wealthy estates. This is a rich, powerful civilization at its height, and you're about to be consumed by it. Knossos Palace rises before you like nothing you've imagined. It's massive, sprawling, painted in bright colors that seem to glow in the Mediterranean sun. Columns painted red, frescoes showing dolphins and birds and lilies, courtyards and staircases leading in every direction. You understand immediately why later Greeks would remember this as the labyrinth. It is a labyrinth, an architectural maze designed to overwhelm and confuse outsiders. You're brought before officials, not the king himself but priests or administrators who inspect you like you're being evaluated for quality. They separate the young men from the young women. The separation is terrifying because you've become a unit, you 14, and now that fragile solidarity is being broken. The young men, including you, are taken to one section of the palace. You're given food and water, then left in a large room with guards at the door. Hours pass. Then a man arrives, speaking broken Greek. He explains that you will be trained. Those who prove capable will become bull leapers, performing in the great religious ceremonies. Those who don't, he doesn't finish the sentence, but the implication is clear. The training begins the next day, and it's brutal. You're taught to approach bulls, to read their movements, to time your leaps. The bulls are kept in pens below the palace, massive animals bred for size and aggression. The first time you're brought into the same enclosure as one, you freeze in terror. The trainer, a Cretan who's clearly done this before, shouts at you in his language, gesturing furiously. The bull charges. You dive aside, barely avoiding being gored. The bull crashes into the wall, turns, and charges again. This continues for weeks. Every day, you're in the training yards with the bulls. Some of your fellow Athenians learn quickly. Alexios, the blacksmith's son, has natural athletic ability and soon can perform basic leaps. Others struggle. Damon, who wanted to be a soldier, freezes every time a bull charges and eventually is simply removed from training. You don't see him again. As for the young women, you learn they've been separated into different groups. Some are being trained in rituals, learning Minoan religious practices and dances. Others have disappeared into parts of the palace you're not allowed to access. Milena, the merchant's daughter you befriended on the ship, was taken with that second group. You ask about her once, and the guard strikes you hard enough to knock you down. You don't ask again. 3 months into your captivity, the first great ceremony approaches. You've learned enough to be considered ready. You're dressed in elaborate Minoan clothing, leather loin wraps, and ornate belts. Your body is painted with religious symbols. You're given wine mixed with something else, some herb or drug that makes you feel simultaneously relaxed and hyper-aware. Then you're led into the great court. The court is packed with spectators, Cretan nobility, priests in elaborate robes, perhaps 1,000 people arranged in tiers around a central arena. In the center waits the bull, a massive black animal that's been specially selected for the ceremony. And you're not alone. 3 other Athenian youths are with you, including Alexios. The ceremony begins with chanting, rhythmic and hypnotic. Drums pound, the crowd sways, and then the bull is released from its restraints. It charges immediately toward the nearest person, which happens to be a girl from your group named Corinna. She's been trained well and executes a perfect leap, grabbing the bull's horns, allowing its upward thrust to flip her over its back, landing gracefully on the other side. The crowd roars approval. The bull turns, confused and angry, and charges again, this time toward Alexios. He tries to leap but mistimes it. The bull's horns catch him in the side, lifting him and throwing him across the arena. He lands badly, and you can hear bones breaking even over the crowd noise. Guards rush in, drag Alexios's broken body away, and the ceremony continues without pause. Your turn comes. The bull is tired now but still dangerous, maybe more dangerous because it's become unpredictable. Charges toward you. Everything you've learned in training narrows to this moment. You run toward the charging bull, plant your hands on its horns, let its upward thrust lift you, flip your body over its back, and land. You're alive. The ceremony continues for hours. Some of your fellow Athenians survive their encounters. Others don't. By the end of the day, 3 of the 7 young men from Athens are dead or crippled. This is just one ceremony. There will be more. The bull leaping is performed regularly throughout the ritual calendar. Each time, more of you will die. Between ceremonies, you're kept in the palace complex, in rooms that are comfortable by the standards of ancient Greece but are undeniably prison cells. You're fed adequately, your health is maintained because damaged performers are useless, but you have no freedom. You exist only to perform in rituals, to risk your life for the entertainment and religious satisfaction of Cretan nobility. Months pass. You've survived 3 ceremonies now, but you've watched 5 of your fellow Athenians die, gored by bulls or killed in the falls that followed failed leaps. The 7 young women are occasionally seen in the palace, but they're changed, hollow-eyed, and silent. The spark that made them individuals has been extinguished. They perform in different rituals, you learn ceremonies you're not allowed to witness. Whatever happens in those rituals has broken something fundamental in them. You've been on Crete for almost a year when you finally understand the full truth of the Minotaur myth. The labyrinth is the palace itself, a confusing maze of corridors and rooms where you're kept trapped. The Minotaur isn't a creature but a system, the entire religious and political apparatus of Minoan Crete that consumes young foreigners in ritual sacrifice. The monster isn't lurking in a chamber, it's everywhere, in every ceremony, every ritual. Every day you wake up knowing you might die in a performance that afternoon. Some of the Athenian youths break psychologically. They refuse to train, refuse to perform. These are taken away and don't return. You learn from whispers among the servants that they're sacrificed directly, killed in private ceremonies in the rooms beneath the palace that Evans would later discover, the chambers containing human bones with knife marks. You've become numb to the horror. It's the only way to survive. When another Athenian dies in the bull leaping, you feel nothing. When the young women are led away for their rituals, you don't allow yourself to imagine what happens to them. You focus only on the immediate, on surviving the next training session, the next ceremony, the next day. But sometimes at night, lying in your cell, you remember Athens. You remember your family, your mother's face, your father's voice. You wonder if they still mourn you or if they've moved on, accepted your death as inevitable. You wonder if Athens is preparing for the next tribute 9 years from your selection, when 14 more young people will make the same journey to this same fate. The myth says that Theseus, son of Athens' king, volunteered to be part of the tribute, that he sailed to Crete, entered the labyrinth, killed the Minotaur with his bare hands or a sword given by Ariadne, and led all the Athenian youths to safety using a thread that allowed him to find his way out of the maze. That he sailed home victorious, though he forgot to change the black sails to white as he'd promised, causing his father to leap to his death, thinking his son was dead. It's a beautiful story. A story of heroism, of clever princesses and brave princes, of monsters defeated and innocents saved. But it's not true. It's what later Greeks told themselves to make sense of a historical reality too horrible to face directly. That their ancestors were forced to send their children as human tribute to a foreign power, and those children died in Cretan religious rituals. No Theseus came. No one was saved. The 14 Athenian youths sent to Crete every 9 years died there. Some in bull-leaping ceremonies, their bodies broken by horns and hooves. Others in direct sacrifices in the underground chambers. The young women in whatever rituals Minoan religion required of them. The specific fates varied, but the outcome was always the same. None returned. Archaeological evidence supports this grim reality. The children's bones found near Knossos, the knife marks indicating ritual sacrifice, the DNA suggesting mainland Greek origin. These weren't Cretan children who died by accident. They were foreign youths brought specifically for sacrifice, just as the myth described, minus the convenient monster and the heroic rescue. The practice continued for generations, perhaps for centuries. Every 9 years, Athens performed the lottery. 14 names were drawn. 14 families were destroyed. The black-sailed ship departed and eventually returned empty. Athens accumulated grief and rage, but Crete's naval superiority made rebellion impossible. The system only ended when Minoan civilization itself collapsed. Around 1450 BCE, the palaces of Crete were destroyed, possibly by the massive volcanic eruption at Thera, modern Santorini, possibly by Mycenaean invasion from mainland Greece, possibly by a combination of natural disaster and human violence. Knossos burned. The administrative system that had demanded tribute collapsed, and Athens was finally free. But the memory remained. Generations of Athenian families carried stories of children lost to Crete. These stories evolved, were embellished, transformed from historical trauma into heroic myth. The palace became a labyrinth. The bull leaping and sacrifices became a single monster. And most crucially, the Greeks added a hero and a happy ending because the truth that their children were sacrificed for generations and no one saved them was too painful to pass down unchanged. Theseus was created retroactively, a hero inserted into historical trauma to make it bearable. The thread provided by Ariadne became a metaphor for the fragile hope that someone might have escaped. The Minotaur became a convenient villain, a monster that could be killed, unlike the systemic cruelty of a powerful civilization exploiting a weaker one. In the centuries that followed, as Athens grew powerful and Crete faded into memory, the Athenians rewrote history. They built temples to Theseus. They celebrated him as a founder hero, second only to Heracles. They turned their traumatic subjugation into a story of triumph. The losers became winners, at least in mythology. But in doing so, they erased the real victims. The 14 youths sent every 9 years whose names were never recorded, whose individual stories were lost, who became simply the Athenian tributes in myth, and then even that generic identity was overshadowed by Theseus's fictional heroism. You, that 14-year-old whose name was called in the lottery, you existed. You were real. You had family who loved you, friends who missed you, dreams that were stolen when you boarded that black-sailed ship. You died on Crete, maybe in the bull-leaping, maybe in the sacrificial chambers, but you died there, and no one remembered your name. Multiply your story by hundreds, perhaps thousands, over the generations this system operated. Each of them a person with the same interior life you have, the same hopes and fears, the same capacity for joy and suffering. Each of them sacrificed to maintain a political system, to demonstrate Minoan power, to satisfy religious requirements that treated human life as a commodity. The Minotaur, understood correctly, wasn't a monster in a maze. It was civilization itself, the way organized societies create systems that consume individuals for the benefit of the powerful. Crete demanded tribute because it could, because it had the naval power to enforce its demands, and Athens was too weak to resist. The bull leaping and sacrifices were religious expressions of this political relationship, making sacred what was fundamentally an exercise in domination. Modern archaeology has revealed the truth behind the myth, but most people still know only the Theseus version. We teach children about the hero and the monster. We celebrate the clever use of thread to navigate the maze. We barely mention the 14 victims, and when we do, we treat them as props in Theseus's story rather than as individuals who suffered and died. But they deserve better. better. They deserve to be remembered not as anonymous sacrifices in someone else's heroic tale, but as real people whose lives were stolen by a system they had no power to resist. The 14-year-old boy chosen in the lottery. The girl who wrote poetry. The blacksmith's son with athletic ability. The merchant's daughter who died in rituals we can't even fully imagine. Their names are lost, but their suffering was real. The terror of having your name called. The days of captivity waiting for the ship. The voyage to a foreign land knowing you would never return. The training with the bulls. The ceremonies where you watched fellow Athenians die. The gradual psychological breaking as you realized no rescue was coming. The final moments, whether in the arena or the sacrifice chamber, when you understood this was the end. That's the real story of the Minotaur's tribute. Not heroism and clever princesses and defeated monsters. Human sacrifice, systematic cruelty, the exploitation of the weak by the strong, and the way later generations transform unbearable historical truth into comforting mythology. The labyrinth still stands at Knossos, or what remains of it. Tourists walk through the ruins, taking photos, marveling at Minoan sophistication. Very few think about the Athenian youths who died there. Very few consider that the beautiful frescoes showing bull-leaping documented real people risking and losing their lives. Very few remember that beneath the palace, in the chambers archaeologists discovered, lie the bones of children sacrificed in rituals that satisfied Minoan religion and demonstrated Minoan power. The Minotaur is dead, if it ever lived, but the system it represented, the willingness of powerful civilizations to consume the weak, the transformation of human beings into commodities and sacrifices, that monster is still very much alive. It takes different forms now, but the essential dynamic remains. The strong demanding tribute from the weak, justifying it through ideology or religion or political necessity, and creating systems that devour individuals while those in power look away. Remember the 14. Remember that they were real. Remember that no hero saved them. Remember that their sacrifice sustained a civilization that has been dead for 3,500 years, their lives spent to maintain a power structure that ultimately collapsed anyway. Remember that the stories we tell about the past often erase the people who actually suffered, replacing them with convenient heroes and satisfying narratives. The black-sailed ship left Athens carrying terrified teenagers. It returned empty. That happened again and again for generations. That's the truth. And the truth, unlike the myth, offers no comfort, no heroism, no happy ending. Just loss, repeated endlessly, until the system that demanded it finally fell. The golden age of Minoan Crete was built partly on the bodies of Athenian children. The beautiful palaces, the sophisticated art, the religious ceremonies that archaeologists admire, all of it was sustained by human sacrifice disguised as tribute. We can appreciate the civilization's achievements while acknowledging the horror that underwrote them. And we can remember the victims, the 14 whose names we don't know but whose suffering echoes across millennia. The boy chosen in the lottery, the girl who cried on the ship, the young man who died in the bull leaping, the young woman who never came back from the rituals. They deserved better than the fate they received. They deserve better than to be forgotten or reduced to props in mythology. They deserve to be remembered as the real people they were, sacrificed not to a monster in a maze but to the much more common and much more terrible monster of human civilization, the systematic willingness to destroy the vulnerable to satisfy the powerful. That's the true story of the Minotaur, not a myth, a memory of real trauma, transformed over centuries into something more palatable but less true. The labyrinth was real, the tributes were real, the deaths were real, and no hero saved them. Remember them.